What would you do if, on your wedding anniversary, your husband handed you divorce papers, right after showing everyone 10 photos of you and his boss? How did things get so out of control that the person I thought was weak ended up turning the whole room against me? Can one little mistake really ruin your whole life in a single night? I'm Morwenna Hale, and I thought I had everything under control. At 33, I worked as a marketing coordinator, lived in a comfortable middle-class home in the suburbs, and had what everyone considered a stable marriage to Elliot, my financial analyst husband of 9 years. We had an 8-year-old daughter, Sadie, who was the light of our lives. Or at least, that's what I told everyone. The truth was more complicated. Elliot had become distant over the past year, buried in spreadsheets and financial reports, barely looking up when I entered a room. He'd grunt responses to my questions about his day, mumble something about work stress, and retreat to his home office until late at night. I felt invisible, unappreciated, like I was managing our entire household and social life while he coasted through on autopilot. That's how I justified what came next. Our 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and I decided to throw the perfect party. Not just for us, but to show everyone, his family, our friends, our neighbors, that the Hales were thriving. I spent weeks planning every detail, the menu, the decorations, the guest list. I wanted proof that I was the perfect wife, the one who held everything together. "Elliot, can you at least pretend to care about this?" I snapped as he sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, barely glancing at the catering samples I'd laid out. "This is our anniversary party, not just mine." He looked up with those tired brown eyes that used to make my heart skip. Now they just annoyed me. "I'm sure whatever you choose will be fine, Morwenna. You always have excellent taste." "That's not the point." I slammed the sample containers down harder than necessary. "I want your input. I want you to act like this matters to you." Elliot closed his laptop slowly, the way he did everything these days, measured, careful, like he was thinking through every action. "It does matter to me. I just trust your judgment." "Trust my judgment." If only he knew. "Your mother called," I said, changing tactics. "She's bringing that awful potato salad again." I told her we already had sides covered, but she insisted. "Mom means well," Elliot said quietly. "She just wants to contribute." Joan Hale had never liked me, not from day one. She was 58 years old and had opinions about everything, especially about how I wasn't good enough for her precious son. She'd make little comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, my parenting, always with a smile, always couched as helpful suggestions. But I knew what she was really saying. "She undermines me," I continued. "And Celia does the same thing. Your sister acts like I'm some kind of threat to your family." Celia was 32, unmarried, and seemed to think that gave her the right to judge my marriage. She'd make pointed comments about commitment and loyalty whenever we were together, like she was some expert on relationships despite never maintaining one longer than 6 months. Elliot rubbed his temples. "They're protective. That's all." "Protective of what? From what?" He looked at me for a long moment, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "I don't know, Morwenna. You tell me." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text message. I grabbed it quickly, angling it away from Elliot's view. "Tonight, everything changes. Adrian." My heart raced as I deleted the message, trying to keep my expression neutral. Adrian Keene was Elliot's boss, a charismatic 44-year-old who actually paid attention when I spoke. He remembered things I told him, asked about my day, made me feel seen in a way Elliot hadn't in months. It had started innocently enough. Conversations at office parties, a few lunches when I'd stopped by Elliot's workplace. Adrian was going through a messy divorce, and I found myself offering a sympathetic ear. He was sophisticated, successful, and most importantly, he made me feel desirable again. "Who was that?" Elliot asked. "Just my brother." Lyle's confirming he can make it tomorrow night. The lie came easily. I'd gotten good at lying over the past few months. Elliot nodded and reopened his laptop. Good. It'll be nice to see him. Lyle was 37 and had always been the peacemaker in our family. He'd tried to stay neutral in my complaints about Elliot, but I could tell he was getting tired of hearing about my marriage problems. My mother, Linda, was more supportive. At 61, she understood what it was like to feel unappreciated by a man who took you for granted. I went back to arranging the catering samples, but my mind was on Adrian's message. What did he mean, everything changes? We'd been careful, meeting for lunch at restaurants across town, keeping our text messages vague. I thought we were safe. I'm going to pick up Sadie from soccer practice, I announced. The party starts at 7 tomorrow, so please try to be home by 5 to help set up. Of course, Elliot said without looking up. As I drove to the school, I called Adrian from my car. What did you mean by that text? I asked as soon as he picked up. Hello to you too, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Can't a man be mysterious? Adrian, I'm serious. Elliot's been acting strange lately, and I can't afford any risks right now. Strange how? I thought about it. Quieter than usual. More watchful. Like he's paying attention to things he normally ignores. You're being paranoid, Adrian said. Elliot's too buried in his work to notice anything beyond his precious spreadsheets. Maybe, but what did you mean about tonight changing everything? There was a pause. I've been thinking about us, Morwenna. About what we want. This sneaking around, these stolen lunches, don't you want more? My stomach dropped. Adrian, we talked about this. I can't just blow up my life. I have Sadie to think about. I know. But my divorce will be final next month, and then what? You think I can just leave Elliot and we'll ride off into the sunset? It doesn't work that way. Why not? Because I wasn't ready to give up the security of my marriage, the respectability, the comfortable life I'd built. Adrian was exciting, but he was also a risk. What if he got bored with me once the thrill of the affair wore off? What if his divorce left him financially strained? What if? I have to go, I said, pulling into the school parking lot. I'll see you next week for lunch. Morwenna. I hung up and sat in my car for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. Everything was under control. Tomorrow night would be perfect, and I'd prove to everyone, including myself, that I had the ideal marriage. Sadie bounded into the car, her soccer cleats muddy and her ponytail askew. Mom, Coach says I'm getting really good at corner kicks. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, grateful for the distraction. Are you excited about the party tomorrow? I guess. Will there be cake? Of course there will be cake, and all your favorite foods. Will Grandma Joan bring her potato salad? I gritted my teeth. Probably. Good. I like it better than the store-bought stuff. Even my own daughter was against me. When we got home, Elliot was in the kitchen, actually cooking dinner instead of hiding behind his laptop. He'd made Sadie's favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Daddy! Sadie ran to him, and he scooped her up in a hug that lasted longer than usual. How was practice, kiddo? Great. I scored 2 goals in scrimmage. That's my girl. He set her down and ruffled her hair. Go wash up, dinner's almost ready. As Sadie ran upstairs, Elliot turned to me. I thought we could eat together tonight, as a family. That's nice, I said, surprised. You usually work through dinner. I've been thinking about that, about a lot of things, actually. There was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. He seemed different, more present, more focused. It was unsettling. What kind of things? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just priorities, what really matters. We ate dinner together, and for the first time in months, Elliot asked Sadie detailed questions about school, her friends, her soccer team. He listened to her answers with genuine interest, laughing at her jokes, helping her with a math problem she'd been struggling with. I should have been happy. This was what I'd been complaining about, his absence, his distraction. But instead, I felt anxious. This sudden attention felt calculated, like he was performing the role of devoted father and husband. After Sadie went to bed, I found Elliot in his office, but instead of working, he was organizing files. Physical files, with handwritten labels. "Spring cleaning?" I asked from the doorway. "Something like that." He didn't look up. "Just getting things in order." "For what?" "Tomorrow night. I want everything to be perfect for our anniversary." The way he said perfect sent a chill down my spine. "Elliot, is everything okay? You're acting different." He finally looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something in his eyes I couldn't identify. "I'm fine, Morwenna. Just looking forward to celebrating 10 wonderful years together." Wonderful years. Right. I went to bed early, but I couldn't sleep. Adrian's text kept running through my mind. Tonight, everything changes. What had he meant? And why was Elliot suddenly so interested in making our anniversary perfect? Around midnight, I heard Elliot come to bed, but he stayed on his side, not reaching for me like he used to. We lay there in the dark, both pretending to sleep, both lost in our own thoughts. I had no idea that tomorrow night would be the last time I'd sleep in this bed, in this house, in this life I'd taken for granted. I had no idea that Elliot's sudden attention to detail wasn't about romance, it was about evidence. And I definitely had no idea that he already knew everything. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and the sound of Elliot making breakfast downstairs. This was becoming a pattern, him being unusually domestic, unusually present. Part of me wondered if he was having an affair too, but Elliot wasn't the type. He was too methodical, too careful, too boring. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Adrian and a text. "We need to talk. Blue Fig at noon." The Blue Fig Bistro was our usual meeting place, a trendy restaurant downtown where we were unlikely to run into anyone from Elliot's office or our neighborhood. I'd been going there so often that the hostess knew me by name. "Morning," I said as I entered the kitchen. Elliot was making pancakes, while Sadie sat at the counter, still in her pajamas. "Morning, Mum," Sadie chirped. "Dad's making Mickey Mouse pancakes." "I can see that." I poured myself coffee and watched Elliot work. He was being too perfect, too attentive. It was unnerving. "I thought I'd take Sadie to the park after breakfast," he said without looking at me. "Give you time to prepare for tonight." "That's thoughtful." I hesitated. "I might run a few errands while you're gone. Last-minute party supplies." "Of course." He flipped a pancake with practiced ease. "Take all the time you need." There was something in his tone, permission, almost like he wanted me to leave. I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. After they left for the park, I drove to the Blue Fig. Adrian was already there, sitting in our usual corner booth, looking agitated. At 44, he was distinguished in a way Elliot wasn't. Silver at his temples, expensive suits, the kind of confidence that came with corner offices and 6-figure salaries. "You look terrible," I said as I slid into the seat across from him. "Thanks. You always know just what to say." He signaled the waitress for another coffee. "We have a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "Someone knows about us." The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. "What do you mean someone knows? Who?" "I'm not sure yet, but yesterday, my assistant mentioned seeing you in the building more often than usual. And then this morning, I found this in my office." He slid a photograph across the table. It was us, sitting in this exact booth, his hand covering mine on the table. The angle suggested it was taken from outside, through the window. "Oh, God." I stared at the photo, my hands shaking. "Who would do this?" "I don't know, but whoever it is, they're watching us." "Maybe it's your ex-wife. Doesn't she have a private investigator?" Adrian shook his head. "The divorce is almost final. She doesn't care what I do anymore." A horrible thought occurred to me. What if it's Elliot? "Elliot?" Adrian laughed, but it sounded forced. Come on, Morwenna. The man can barely figure out how to work the coffee machine in the break room. You think he's suddenly turned into some master detective? You don't know him like I do. He's more observant than people think. He's a numbers guy. He sees spreadsheets and profit margins, not this. He gestured between us. But I wasn't convinced. Elliot's behavior this morning, his sudden domesticity, the way he'd been organizing files last night. What if it wasn't random? I think we should cool things down for a while, I said. Just until we figure out who took this. Adrian leaned forward. Or we could stop hiding. Adrian, I'm serious. I'm tired of sneaking around like teenagers. My divorce will be final in 3 weeks. We could be together openly. And what about my marriage? My daughter? You're miserable with Elliot. You've told me so yourself, dozens of times. Sadie would adjust. I had complained about Elliot, extensively. How he ignored me, how he took me for granted, how our marriage had become more like a business arrangement than a romance. But hearing Adrian suggest I should just blow it all up made me realize I wasn't ready for that step. It's not that simple. It could be. He reached for my hand again, and I pulled back. Don't. Not here. Not until we know who's watching. Adrian's jaw tightened. So, what are you saying? That this was just a game to you? No, that's not. I looked around the restaurant, suddenly aware of every face, every potential camera. I just need time to think. How much time? I don't know. A few weeks. A month. A month. He leaned back in his seat. And what happens if Elliot finds out in the meantime? He won't. You seem very sure of that. Because I know my husband. He's predictable, reliable, boring. He sees what he wants to see. And what he wants to see is a happy marriage. Adrian studied my face. You really believe that? Yes. Then you're not as smart as I thought you were. The word stung. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Forget it. He stood up and threw money on the table. Enjoy your anniversary party tonight. I hope it's everything you want it to be. He left me sitting there, staring at the photograph. Someone was watching us. Someone new. But who? I drove home in a daze, my mind racing through possibilities. Elliot's mother, Joan, had never trusted me. She was the type to hire a private investigator if she suspected something. His sister Celia was suspicious by nature, always asking probing questions about my whereabouts. But when I got home, Elliot and Sadie were in the backyard, setting up tables for the party. Elliot was laughing at something Sadie had said, his face relaxed and happy. He didn't look like a man who'd discovered his wife's affair. How are your errands? He asked as I joined them outside. Fine. Just picked up some last-minute decorations. I'd forgotten to actually buy anything, but he didn't seem to notice. Mum, look. Sadie pointed to the string lights Elliot had hung between the trees. It looks like a fairy garden. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Elliot smiled at me, and for a moment I felt a pang of guilt. He was trying so hard to make tonight special. Maybe Adrian was right. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the photograph was from his ex-wife's investigator, or just some random person who thought they recognized us. I invited a few people from the office, Elliot said as we worked. Hope that's okay. My blood went cold. Anyone I know? Just the usual suspects. Tom from accounting, Sarah from HR, and Adrian said he might stop by. I nearly dropped the tablecloth I was holding. Adrian, why would he come to our anniversary party? Elliot shrugged. He's my boss. It's good politics. Plus, he's going through a rough time with his divorce. I thought it might cheer him up to be around a happy couple. A happy couple. The irony was suffocating. That's thoughtful of you. I try. He looked at me with those steady brown eyes. After all, we're celebrating 10 years of marriage. That's worth sharing with people who matter to us. People who matter. Did that include the man I'd been sleeping with for the past 4 months? The afternoon flew by in a blur of preparations. I kept checking my phone, expecting another cryptic message from Adrian, but there was nothing. Maybe he'd decided not to come. Maybe he'd realized how insane it would be to show up at my anniversary party. By 6:30, guests were starting to arrive. My brother Lyle came first, bringing flowers and his usual diplomatic smile. At 37, he'd perfected the art of staying neutral in family conflicts. "You look stressed," he said as he hugged me. "Just party nerves. I want everything to be perfect." "It will be. You always throw great parties." My mother Linda arrived next, carrying a casserole dish and wearing her best dress. She'd been my biggest supporter through my complaints about Elliot, always ready with sympathy and advice about how men needed to be trained to appreciate their wives. "Where's the anniversary boy?" she asked, looking around. "In the kitchen, playing host." I helped her set down the casserole. "Thanks for coming, Mom." "Wouldn't miss it. 10 years is a real accomplishment these days." Joan and Celia arrived together, Joan carrying her infamous potato salad, and Celia wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. They both hugged me with the kind of forced warmth that fooled no one. "Lovely decorations," Joan said, her tone suggesting they were anything but. "Thank you. I thought the lights were a nice touch." "Very festive." Celia's smile was equally fake. "Where's my brother?" "Inside. He's been so excited about tonight." "Has he?" Joan's eyebrows rose slightly. "How wonderful." More guests arrived, neighbors, friends from work, Elliot's colleagues from the office. I played the perfect hostess, making sure everyone had drinks, directing them to the food table, accepting compliments on the decorations. At 7:15, Adrian arrived. He looked devastating in a dark suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. Several women at the party turned to look at him as he walked through the back gate, and I felt a familiar flutter of pride that this sophisticated, successful man had chosen me. "Adrian," Elliot appeared at my side, extending his hand. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Adrian replied, shaking Elliot's hand firmly. 10 years is quite an achievement." "We're very blessed," Elliot said, putting his arm around my waist. "Aren't we, honey?" The casual endearment, combined with his touch, made my skin crawl. Not because I didn't love Elliot. Somewhere, buried under months of resentment and neglect, I still did. But because Adrian was right there, watching us play happy couple. "Very blessed," I managed. Adrian's eyes met mine for just a moment, and I saw something I didn't like. Amusement, maybe. Or anticipation. "I brought a little something for the happy couple," he said, producing a wrapped box from his jacket. "You didn't have to do that," I said quickly. "Oh, but I did." His smile was sharp. "It's something very special, very personal." Elliot took the box. "Should we open it now?" "Actually," Adrian said, "I think it would be better saved for later, when you have more privacy." "Nonsense," Elliot said. "We're among friends here." He started to unwrap the box, and I held my breath. What had Adrian brought? Another photograph? Some kind of evidence of our affair? Was this his idea of forcing my hand? Inside the box was a crystal picture frame. "For your favorite memory," Adrian said. "I thought you might have the perfect photo to put in it." "How thoughtful," Elliot said, examining the frame. "Thank you, Adrian. This is beautiful." "It really is," I said, relief flooding through me. "We'll treasure it." "I'm sure you will." Adrian's smile widened. "I have a feeling you'll be making some very memorable moments tonight." Something about his tone made me uneasy, but before I could analyze it further, Elliot was leading him toward the bar, talking about work projects and quarterly reports. The party continued, and I began to relax. Maybe I'd been overthinking everything. Maybe Adrian had decided to be discreet after all. Maybe tonight would go off without a hitch. I should have known better. At 9 o'clock, just as I was starting to think we'd pulled it off, Elliot tapped his fork against his wine glass. "Excuse me, everyone," he called out. "If I could have your attention for just a moment." The backyard fell quiet. Sadie, who'd been running around with some of the neighbor kids, came to stand beside me. "I wanted to thank you all for being here tonight," Elliot continued. 10 years ago, Morwenna and I promised to love, honor, and cherish each other, for better or worse, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer. He paused, looking directly at me. "Tonight, I want to renew those vows. But first, I have a special anniversary surprise for my beautiful wife." My heart started racing. This wasn't part of the plan. We hadn't discussed renewing vows or anniversary surprises. "Elliot," I said quietly, "what are you doing?" "Trust me," he said, that strange smile playing at his lips again. "I think you're going to find this very illuminating." He disappeared into the house and returned a moment later with a laptop and a portable projector. "I thought we could take a little trip down memory lane," he announced to the crowd. "A slideshow of our best moments together." No, no. This was not happening. "Elliot, really, that's not necessary." "Oh, but it is." He was setting up the projector, pointing it at the white wall of our house. "I've been working on this for weeks. I think everyone will find it very educational." Adrian had gone very still beside the bar. Joan and Celia were watching with interest. My mother looked confused. Lyle was frowning. The projector hummed to life, casting a bright square of light on the wall. "Now," Elliot said, laptop in hand, "let's see what memories we've made." The first image appeared on the wall. It wasn't from our wedding. It wasn't from Sadie's birth or a family vacation. It was me and Adrian, kissing in the parking lot behind the Blue Fig Bistro. Someone screamed. It might have been me. "Elliot," I started. "Oh, we're just getting started," he said calmly, clicking to the next image. This one showed Adrian and me entering a hotel together, his hand on the small of my back. Click. Us in his car, my hand on his thigh. Click. Sharing a bottle of wine at a restaurant across town. Click. Him kissing my neck in what I'd thought was a secluded corner of a parking garage. 10 photos in total. 10 moments I'd thought were private, secret, safe. 10 pieces of evidence that destroyed my life in less than 2 minutes. The backyard was dead silent except for the hum of the projector and my own ragged breathing. "Elliot," I whispered, "I can explain." "Can you?" He turned to face me, and his expression was calm, controlled, terrifying. "Because I'd love to hear how you explain 4 months of lying, cheating, and making a fool of me in front of everyone we know. It's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Happy anniversary, Morwenna." I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were legal documents, divorce papers, custody papers, financial statements. "You'll want to read those carefully," Elliot said, "especially the part about adultery and how it affects asset division in this state." I looked around the backyard. Joan was holding Sadie, who looked confused and frightened. Celia was staring at me with undisguised disgust. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Lyle was shaking his head slowly. And Adrian was gone. He'd slipped away sometime during the slideshow, leaving me to face the consequences alone. "I think the party's over," Elliot said quietly. "Don't you?" The law office of Carter and Finch smelled like leather and disappointment. I sat in an uncomfortable chair across from Margaret Carter, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who specialized in family law. She'd been recommended by my mother's friend, though I was beginning to wonder if she was up to the task of fixing the mess my life had become. "Mrs. Hale," she said, spreading Elliot's legal documents across her mahogany desk, "I have to be honest with you. This is going to be an uphill battle." It had been 3 days since the anniversary party from hell, 3 days since my marriage imploded in front of 27 witnesses, 3 days since Adrian had vanished like smoke, refusing to return my calls or answer my texts. "Elliot's being vindictive," I said. "He's trying to punish me for one mistake." Margaret looked at me over her reading glasses. "One mistake?" "Mrs. Hale, there are 10 photographs documenting your affair, along with hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and a timeline that spans 4 months. This isn't a one-time lapse in judgment. I was neglected. He ignored me for months, buried himself in work, made me feel invisible. I was vulnerable. That may be true, but it doesn't change the legal reality. In this state, adultery affects everything: asset division, spousal support, and especially custody arrangements. The word custody hit me like a physical blow. He can't take Sadie away from me. I'm her mother. He's not trying to take her away entirely. He's seeking primary custody with supervised visitation for you initially, expanding to standard visitation once you've completed counseling. Supervised visitation, like I'm some kind of criminal. Margaret set down the papers. Mrs. Hale, your husband has documented evidence of a 4-month affair with his supervisor. He has witnesses to your public humiliation of him, including family members who are prepared to testify about your behavior. He has financial records showing money spent on this relationship, money that came from joint accounts meant for household expenses. I felt sick. What kind of financial records? Hotel bills charged to your credit card, expensive lunches, gifts purchased at jewelry stores. Your husband is very thorough. Too thorough. Elliot had always been detail-oriented, but this level of documentation suggested he'd known about Adrian for longer than I'd thought. How long had he been watching me, collecting evidence, planning this moment? There has to be something we can do. He's not innocent in this. He neglected our marriage, drove me to seek companionship elsewhere. Do you have documentation of that neglect? Counseling records? Attempts to address marital problems? I shifted in my seat. Well, no, but everyone knows. Everyone knows what? That you complained about your husband to friends and family. That's not evidence of neglect, Mrs. Hale. That's evidence that you were building a narrative to justify your actions. The words stung because they were true. I had been building a narrative, painting Elliot as the neglectful husband and myself as the wronged wife. But hearing it said so bluntly made it sound calculated, manipulative. So what are my options? Margaret leaned back in her chair. Limited. We can try to negotiate better terms, perhaps joint custody instead of primary custody for him, a more equitable division of assets. But given the evidence he has, we'd be negotiating from a position of weakness. What if I fight it? Take it to trial? Do you really want 10 photographs of your affair displayed in open court? Do you want your daughter to potentially testify about the tension she's observed at home? Do you want your family and friends called as witnesses to describe your behavior? No, I definitely didn't want any of that. There's something else, Margaret continued. Your husband's attorney has filed a restraining order against Adrian Keene, preventing him from having any contact with your daughter. He can do that? When the other man is his boss and there's evidence of the affair affecting the workplace, yes. It's actually quite smart. It prevents any future complications and protects the child from potentially confusing situations. Smart. That was Elliot. Always thinking 3 steps ahead, always planning for contingencies. How had I ever thought he was oblivious? I need to think about this, I said, gathering my purse. Don't think too long. Your husband wants a response within the week, or he'll proceed with filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. Once that happens, our negotiating position becomes even weaker. I left the law office feeling like I was drowning. My phone had been buzzing all morning with calls from family members, friends, and neighbors who'd heard about the party. The story was spreading through our social circle like wildfire. The woman who got caught cheating at her own anniversary party. I drove to my mother's house, hoping for sympathy and support. Linda lived in a tidy ranch home about 20 minutes away, surrounded by the kind of garden that appeared in home magazines. She'd always been my ally, the one person who understood my frustrations with Elliot. "Oh, honey," she said as she opened the door, but her hug felt different, tentative, uncertain. We sat in her living room with tea and store-bought cookies. Mom kept fidgeting with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. The lawyer says my options are limited, I began. I'm sure she's just being cautious. Mom, you saw those pictures. You know this is real. Linda sighed. I saw them. The whole neighborhood saw them, thanks to Joan running her mouth. What's Joan been saying? That she always knew you weren't good enough for Elliot. That she tried to warn him before the wedding, but he wouldn't listen. That poor Sadie is the real victim in all this. Poor Sadie. My daughter had been staying with Joan since the party, and I hadn't been allowed to see her. Elliot said she needed time to process what had happened, but I suspected Joan was poisoning her against me. I made a mistake, I said. One mistake. Doesn't that count for anything? My mother finally looked at me directly. Morwenna, this wasn't one mistake. This was months of lying, sneaking around, spending family money on another man. I supported you when you complained about Elliot, but I never told you to have an affair. You said I deserved better. You said I should find someone who appreciated me. I meant you should talk to your husband, maybe get counseling. I didn't mean you should sleep with his boss. The judgment in her voice was devastating. If I couldn't count on my mother's support, who could I count on? Where's Lyle in all this? I asked. Your brother is trying to stay neutral, but he's upset. He liked Elliot. We all did. Liked. Past tense. And now, Mom set down her teacup. Honey, you humiliated that man in front of everyone who matters to him. You made him look like a fool, and then you tried to justify it by blaming him for your choices. I was unhappy. So was he, apparently, but he didn't handle it by cheating. The conversation continued for another hour, but it was clear that even my mother's loyalty had limits. She'd support me through the divorce, help me find a place to live, babysit Sadie when I got visitation rights. But she wouldn't pretend that what I'd done was acceptable. I left feeling more isolated than ever. My phone showed 17 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters or gossips who'd heard the story. I turned it off and drove aimlessly through town, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. At a red light, I saw a familiar figure walking out of a coffee shop. Adrian, looking perfectly composed in his expensive suit. I honked the horn and pulled over, jumping out of my car before he could disappear again. Adrian, wait! He turned and his expression was carefully neutral. Morwenna, I was wondering when I'd hear from you. You've been avoiding my calls. I've been dealing with the fallout from your husband's little slideshow presentation. Our slideshow. It was both of us in those pictures. He looked around nervously. Could we not do this on the street? Fine. Get in the car. He hesitated, then climbed into the passenger seat. Up close, I could see the stress in his face, lines around his eyes, tension in his jaw. How bad is it at work? I asked. Bad. HR is conducting an investigation into our relationship. Since you're the spouse of a direct report, I could lose my job. I'm sorry, I never thought. That's the problem, isn't it? You never thought. About consequences, about other people, about anything beyond what you wanted in the moment. The accusation stung. That's not fair. You pursued me just as much as I pursued you. I was getting divorced anyway. I had nothing to lose. You had a family. A family that ignored me. Adrian laughed bitterly. Is that still your story? Even after seeing how methodically your husband documented everything? The man who ignored you somehow managed to track your every move for 4 months. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe Elliot wasn't as oblivious as you thought. Maybe he was gathering evidence for exactly this moment. The possibility had been nagging at me for days. How long do you think he knew? Based on the timeline his lawyer provided to HR, probably from the beginning. That first lunch we had. He knew. Every hotel visit, every restaurant, every stolen kiss, he was watching. But why didn't he say anything? Why let it continue? Adrian shrugged. Maybe he wanted to see how far you'd go. Maybe he needed time to get his ducks in a row legally. Or maybe he just wanted enough evidence to destroy you completely. The last possibility was the most chilling. I'd always thought of Elliot as passive, reactive, but this level of planning suggested a calculating mind I'd never suspected. "So what happens now?" I asked. Now I try to save my career and you try to salvage whatever relationship you can with your daughter. We don't see each other anymore. We don't talk. We pretend this never happened. Adrian, I'm serious, Morwenna. It's over. Whatever this was, whatever we thought it might become, it's done." He got out of the car without another word, leaving me sitting alone in a parking lot, finally understanding that I'd lost everything for a man who'd never intended to be there when the consequences came due. That evening, I sat in my empty house. Elliot had moved out and taken Sadie with him, staring at the divorce papers. The terms were harsh but not unreasonable given the circumstances. I'd get the house but have to buy out Elliot's share. Joint custody of Sadie, but primary residence with him. Limited spousal support for 2 years, enough to get back on my feet. It could have been worse. It should have been worse given what I'd done. Maybe that was Elliot's final gift to me, mercy disguised as justice. I picked up a pen and signed the papers. The courthouse was exactly as depressing as I'd imagined. Fluorescent lights, institutional green walls, and the kind of hard plastic chairs designed to make everyone uncomfortable. I sat with Margaret Carter, watching Elliot across the aisle with his attorney, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Webb, who looked like she ate cheating spouses for breakfast. It had been 2 weeks since I'd signed the divorce papers, but Elliot's lawyer had requested a formal hearing for the custody arrangement. Something about ensuring the child's best interests were properly represented. I suspected it was really about making sure I understood exactly how precarious my position was. Sadie sat in the front row behind Elliot, flanked by Joan and Celia. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, probably something Joan had bought her, and she wouldn't look at me. My 8-year-old daughter, who used to run to me every day after school, now treated me like a stranger. All rise for the Honourable Judge Patricia Morrison. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with silver hair and the kind of no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity. She reviewed the case files while we stood in silence. "Please be seated. This is a hearing regarding custody arrangements in the matter of Hale versus Hale." She looked at both legal teams. "I've reviewed the documentation submitted by both parties. Mr. Hale's attorney, you may proceed." Patricia Webb stood gracefully. "Your Honor, this case involves a clear pattern of deception and manipulation that directly impacts the welfare of the minor child involved. Mrs. Hale conducted a 4-month extramarital affair with her husband's supervisor, using marital assets to fund this relationship while lying to her family about her whereabouts and activities." She gestured to a stack of evidence on her table. "The documentation is extensive: photographs, financial records, timeline analysis, and witness statements from family members who observed the deterioration of Mrs. Hale's relationship with her daughter during this period." "Objection," Margaret said. "There's no evidence that Mrs. Hale's relationship with her daughter deteriorated." "I'll allow it," Judge Morrison said. "Continue, Ms. Webb." "Mrs. Hale's behavior during this period shows a pattern of prioritizing her own desires over her family's needs. She missed school events, forgot parent-teacher conferences, and left her daughter with babysitters while conducting her affair. Most concerning is her complete lack of remorse or accountability for these choices." I wanted to object, to defend myself, but Margaret had warned me to stay quiet unless directly addressed by the judge. "Mr. Hale, by contrast, has maintained his responsibilities as a father throughout this difficult period. He documented his wife's behavior not out of vindictiveness, but out of genuine concern for his daughter's welfare. The child has been staying with Mr. Hale and his family since the affair was revealed, and reports indicate she's more stable and secure than she's been in months." Webb sat down, and Margaret rose to present our side. "Your Honor, while Mrs. Hale acknowledges her mistakes in her marriage, there's no evidence that she's been anything but a loving mother to Sadie. The affair, while regrettable, was a symptom of a deteriorating marriage in which Mrs. Hale felt neglected and unappreciated. Even as Margaret spoke the words we'd rehearsed, they sounded hollow in the formal courtroom setting. The judge's expression remained neutral, but I could see she wasn't buying the neglected wife narrative any more than my lawyer had. Mrs. Hale is committed to rebuilding her relationship with her daughter and has already begun counseling to address the issues that led to her poor choices. She's requesting joint custody with equal time sharing, which would allow Sadie to maintain a strong relationship with both parents. Judge Morrison made notes as Margaret spoke, occasionally glancing at me with clinical assessment that made me feel like a specimen under a microscope. "I'd like to hear from Mrs. Hale directly," the judge said. "Please approach the witness stand." My legs felt unsteady as I walked forward. The bailiff swore me in, and I sat facing the judge, acutely aware of everyone watching. "Mrs. Hale, do you understand why we're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor, because of my affair." "And do you take responsibility for the choices that led to the breakdown of your marriage?" This was the moment Margaret had prepared me for. Full accountability, genuine remorse, focus on Sadie's welfare. "Yes, Your Honor. I made terrible choices that hurt my family. I was selfish and dishonest, and I deeply regret the pain I've caused." "What steps have you taken to address the issues that led to these choices?" "I've started individual counseling with Dr. Rebecca Martinez. I've also begun attending a support group for people dealing with relationship issues. I want to understand why I made such destructive decisions and ensure I never hurt my daughter like this again." Judge Morrison nodded. "Tell me about your relationship with Sadie." "She's the most important thing in my life. I know my actions have confused and hurt her, but I love her more than anything. I want the chance to rebuild her trust and be the mother she